All right, so can you start off by saying your name and your job title?
Daniel Oostdyk. My job title is Director of Animal Care at this very small zoo. I am also, I guess you would call, a wildlife rehabilitator for our rescue center. So
Awesome. Okay. So what exactly does your job entail? Like overall, day to day, that kind of stuff?
So this is a very unique job here in the sense that it's not your typical zoo. And so your typical zoo, you have people that are coming in every day, and you have a staff that is working almost with admissions and all that stuff. We do not do that. We do have people come here almost every day, but they don't pay. They're usually bringing me wildlife animals, and so therefore I have no one standing in the front. We run basically all of our internships in a way that students can kind of pick their own hours, and we look at the task of making sure there's someone here every day versus necessarily every hour. And so for some students that means coming in after school, and so I don't have a typical hour that I'm downstairs checking in, but my job is more to make sure that that I take a look at each day, make sure that all the jobs are being done, that animals are being fed, that we have enrichment going on, any wildlife animals coming in, that make sure that they are receiving care, make the phone calls to the vets to say, hey, we need x-rays, or we might need blood work, and to make sure that that all happens. And during school semesters, when spring and fall, I rely on making sure that at those times that that all the interns are making sure that the jobs are getting done. When school is not in session, winter or summer, then
Yeah.
if there's no one else available, then that's where I have to do all the work. Otherwise, I rely on you guys.
Right. Okay, and then can you give a summary of your typical workday? So just what you did the other day, or I mean, you kind of did a little bit, but if you want to go a little bit more in depth.
Yesterday, woke up at 6:30. I have a loose caiman, and so you might have to go down and catch a caiman. We have about 90 animals, and most of which are very simple to take care of. A lot of them are cared for on almost what you could think on a daily schedule, or a set schedule, which means on certain days, certain jobs get done. There are some animals that need care every single day, specifically the mammals, the wallaby, coati, foxes, all of them according to, with the USDA license as a zoo, we're required to make sure that they receive daily care, which is okay because we have less mammals. We have about 11 mammals. Most of it is reptiles. And yes, we want to walk by and check on them every day, but majority of them, for example, are snakes. We feed our snakes every other Friday, which means they go to the bathroom almost every other Tuesday. And so their cleanup schedule is quite easy, quite simple. Checking to make sure that the water's fine. And so my job sometimes might only be about 2 hours to hour and a half. I'm pretty quick at what I do because I have a lot of other jobs that I do, and but it can be a absolute full day. For example, yesterday, because I was away for a couple days. Yesterday, I literally spent all day trying to play catch up. Depending on the season, right now it's kind of quiet season. We have a couple of turtles in rehab, and their rehab is really just they're not able to be released this winter, and so it's just kind of keeping them until the spring. Hopefully by then their shell will have healed strong enough that they can be released back in the wild. But in the spring, during our baby season, we might have at one time 35 raccoons, 12 skunks. I think at one time I remember having almost 50 rehab animals on this property, and it was quite chaotic.
Yeah,
Usually we don't have that many at a given time, but during baby season and depending on what else is going on with other rehabbers, it can get crazy. So so basically, to answer your question, most days it is go down, evaluate what needs to be done. If interns are coming in, I usually will leave notes for them. Otherwise, at this point in the semester, they're usually pretty good at knowing what needs to be done.
Right.
And then making sure at the end of the day that everything that needed to be done got done. If not, then sometimes I'm up quite late trying to get everything done. But usually we're pretty good.
Awesome. Okay. Can you talk about the educational career path that you took to get to your current position? So I know that you probably had to take an exam for the wildlife rehabilitator license that you have, but...
Absolutely. First off, let me start off by saying I'm not from New York. I'm from New Jersey. New Jersey has a very different approach of how you become a wildlife rehabilitator. New Jersey, you have to do an apprenticeship. And so you find a rehabilitator, specifically they usually are studying something. And things have might change since when I was down there, but I met up with a guy named Bill Bosenberg. He was the state go-to guy with reptiles, and so especially in the northern region, and he had over 600 reptiles. I worked with him.
Wow.
And that was an awesome experience. One of the things that's really cool is you get a chance learning hands-on how to do things, which is critical. It really is. In New York State, the process is there's a couple of steps. First step is you fill out an application saying that you want to become a rehabilitator, in which case usually you used to have to pay $15. Now it's free, but they'll send you a study guide and a packet to learn from, and basically you're going to take a test, and it's 100 questions, 110 questions, and it's 400 of the questions on the practice guide. 100 of the tests are going to be in those 400. So you will have read all the questions. And then they add 10 other ones which you don't know, and those are future potential questions. So they're kind of feeling them out. They don't count, but they're putting them in now. And so if you pass that, you got to get at least an 80. If you pass that, then the next step is you should get notified by mail, but then you'll get a follow-up call from your DEC representative, and they're supposed to set up an interview. Sometimes they require you to come in person, sometimes they require you to just come to do it over the phone. It's quite simple, but at that point in time, you are certified to work with all of your small game, reptilian, rehabilitation. You're not licensed to work with federal birds. You need to get your federal license for that, to do like birds of prey or your water bird, any of the birds that do travel, that migrate, because they're beyond New York State regulations. And you're not licensed to do RVS, which means rabies vector species. Basically, I did that in 2009. In 2010, I took my RVS course, but because of shots, I wasn't certified until 2014. In 2014, I got my Class 2 license, RVS. So what that means is I got my license, I applied, I submitted a whole bunch of protocols, and talked about, okay, I would like to take on interns and train them and teach them how to rehabilitate. And so I filled out a packet and explained how I'm going to go over safety, how I'm going to go over animal behavior, animal care, talk about proper, gloves and all those fun things that you're supposed to teach people, and go over. And so, but between 2009 and 2014, when I got my Class 2 license, every year there's a conference, and the conference is, in my opinion, especially for college students, they offer a college discount, is critical. And because that's where you're collaborating with other rehabbers, you're meeting up with people and you're talking with them. I met a rehabber in this area. Her name's Gabe. She's been a huge help to me. Absolutely, she's been doing it for like 25 years, 30 years. So she just has so much knowledge.
For sure.
And so she, anytime I have a question, I always call her, you know. And it's always the beginning of the season because you go all winter and you forget everything. And so the beginning of the season, you get your first opossum and you're like, shoot, what's the formula? And so you call her up and be like, hey, I just got my opossum in, and you know they do a different formula. So what is it again? And medications, that's a big thing. Is, you know, some animals you can't medicate with certain drugs and others you can, and learning the dosage, because a lot of times we're given almost expired drug that the vets can't use anymore because it's expiring. And so it's not your first two choice, but it does the job. Right. And it's donated, it's free, or it's low cost, and so we'll use it. And so it's okay, usually you would use ivermectin, but maybe you can't get ivermectin, so what other options can you use? And so that's a big thing, is connecting with other people. I did my RVS course at the conference. I did my ABCs, which is basically, it's $95, but it's a 9-hour course that kind of goes over everything you might need to know. I did fluid therapy, turtle repair, because I do a lot of turtle. But really the big thing is you get connected with people. You try to write down people's numbers. You learn. I love going to people's facilities, and a lot of people are scared to do that, to show people, because maybe they're doing things a little sketchy. Maybe it's not done the best way. Yeah. But it's incredible. I mean, that's how you learn what works. And I'm on right now. I'm building my 3rd rehab center, because each time I build one, I'm like, oh, it would be so much better if we did this. Or it's so much more practical we have this. And so right now we're building a center that is down on property that's a little bit away from all the noise of a children's camp, because we have a children's camp here. And so what's more stressful to a wild animal than a whole bunch of kids running around screaming? And so you have to keep them away from public, but even noise, that's a big factor too. And so you're always learning, and I think one of the biggest things I've learned is realize, don't ever be insulted if someone tries to offer you advice. And there's been times where people have told me that I've been messed up and I've done things wrong, and maybe I was right, maybe I wasn't. But take that criticism and say, okay, they're trying to make you a better person. They're trying to make you a better rehabber, a better whatever. And so don't be offended by it, but take it and learn from it. And I've had some people, I've done some messed up, I've done some things that I look back and I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that I did this. I had a raccoon once that I was afraid to have it bite me, so I never palpated its hip, and it had a double break fracture. And if I would have known that, we could have used, I made it suffer throughout the weekend because the vets were closed on the weekend. And if we would have known that, we could have, euthanized it. But it seemed to be able to move. I do not know how. It must have, before we caught it, must have taken some drugs of its own. But sometimes you look back and you're like, I can't believe I did that. But you learn and you try to do better next time. Right. So.
I think you already touched on it, but what education or experiences were most valuable in preparing you to follow this type of career?
So, I always wanted to work at SeaWorld. I love SeaWorld. This is being videotaped, so I can't say everything. But I always wanted to work there, and I remember going down there, and every time I go down there, I've paid 6 times to do the behind-the-scenes tour, and one of the first times the trainer told me, if you want to work here, you need to get a hands-on experience. Education's important, right. But realistically, hands-on experience is so much more important. And so I started looking to find a spot to get hands-on experience. So I worked at a pet store, and basically I made a deal with the owner where I worked for free and she gave me all the crickets I needed. I was paying more money in crickets feeding my own animals than I was actually making. Right. And so it was a great deal. But I worked there for 3 years, got a little bit of experience in the pet trade. thought it was fun, but wasn't what I wanted to do. And so then I found that guy, Bill, with Snakes and Scales, and that was eye-turning. That was, okay, now I've gone from working with primarily fish and a little bit of reptiles to now lots of reptiles. And I was a kid in a candy store. It was awesome. We did everything. Almost any type of reptile you could think of. I never worked with a Komodo dragon or a ghillie monster, but besides that, I think I've worked with everything else. Awesome. And so it was really, really cool. But both of that really got me into knowing that I love to talk to people about animals. And I love animals, I do. But I enjoy, even more than loving animals myself, I enjoy watching other people learn to appreciate them, or to used to have a fear and no longer have that fear. And so for me, specifically with reptiles, everyone hates reptiles. And so that's why I kind of have grown to liking them. Plus, they're so much easier. They really are.
Yeah.
And so, but for me, I think both of those jobs, and then really, actually, one of my favorite things is I love designing enclosures and cages and stuff like that, and just making them fun. And I've been doing construction my whole life, and so my uncle designed at the Bronx Zoo. He designed the whole Congo exhibit.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I remember as a little kid, before it opened up, and everything was steel, and they were putting mason all over everything. I remember walking through it and playing in the gorilla exhibit before the gorillas were in it, and just seeing the behind the scenes. And I was like, man, this is so much cool, and that's what I would love to do. But I'm not smart enough to be an architect, so I just decided I'll just build my own little zoo. So.
Right. Okay, so as a wildlife professional, do you have any major goals that you're moving towards?
Yes. So we just built a brand new center, and we're really excited for it. There's a couple things that I already talked about, the noise. Another big factor is our zoo downstairs kept about 87 degrees. You take a raccoon that's been hit by a car in December, and you bring it into there, he's going to start freaking out. It's way too hot. He has a winter coat on. And so we needed to be able to have a spot that was more climate control, away from reptiles. And so there was noise, heat, and then the zoo is designed to be somewhat appealing. I do not have the grants that the big zoos do. And so I try to do the best I can. But ultimately, the painting, all the stuff that we have, we try to make it where we can clean it, but the reality is when you're dealing with animals from the wild, and you have mites, you have ticks, you have fleas, we had a flea epidemic this past summer, and so you have all these parasite stuff, and so we try to create a spot that we don't have to worry about rehab animals creating a problem with our zoo animals, that we can properly clean, and that the enclosures can be in a way that they're big enough, but they're not wasting space for the zoo animals, which all led us to the point where we needed to build a new building. And so we built a new building. It is 97% up, and so all the exteriors are done. All the interior walls are framed. We're missing that final piece of wood. And then I have some of the stuff ordered for the materials, but we still are waiting on some few donations and all that stuff. But that will equip us and allow us to be able to properly clean cages, properly house animals in larger exhibits, be able to do temperature control that we want. But the coolest thing that I'm most excited about is I really have learned over the past couple of years that my heart is, yes, to rehab animals and to release them back in the wild. But my bigger joy comes from when someone brings me an animal and that 5 to sometimes an hour-long conversation I get to have with them.
Right.
And because that's where I get to almost empower them to do the same. And we get to talk about, okay, what animals need help versus what does not need help. And so when we built this new building, I wanted a big part of it to be help in the educational field. And so we have it now set up where whether I'm here or not, the beginning of the building is unlocked, and so that anyone can come in. And what will happen is when they come in, it's going to be all education. And we're going to talk about what animals need help. I was just down in Disney at Animal Kingdom, and I was talking with a lot of the people down there about what they do with conservation and all that stuff. And so much of what I want to help out in is really just teaching people how they can help. Mm-hmm. And if each one of us understand how we can help, then I've multiplied the workforce. And so that is really my heart and my goal. And so when we built this building, right now I'm actually trying to create skeleton mounts of a lot of these animals that we get around here. Yeah. So that someone brings me a cracked turtle, a turtle with a cracked shell, I can show you the anatomy and show you how the carapace, the spinal cord is connected, and okay, what type of fix can we do? What will we need help? Understanding, okay, this type of injury I can handle. This type of injury has to go straight to a vet. And if you are in Mexico, for example, my vet's in Mexico, and so why don't you bring him right to the Mexico vet, versus if it's just an orphan, then bring him right to me, because my vet is going to be overwhelmed with stuff anyways. Right. And so teaching people what needs help, what doesn't need help.
Right, because I'm sure you get a lot of people that have taken things that don't need to be taken. Yes. That are confused about it, kind of thing.
Yes, and it's the hardest thing, and this is where I think some rehabbers, this is one downfall of the rehab community. We have some people that are very strong personalities, and that's great. We do need them. But to realize that a lot of people in the public think they're helping when they're not, and so what do you do in those scenarios? Do you just tell them off and make them where they never want to help again? Maybe by never helping again, they won't hurt future populations. Or do you explain to them why they injured the animal and explain so next time they don't do it, but they're still willing to help? Right. And sometimes rehabbers have a hard time because you get an animal that was originally saved that could have been helped. Or a lot of times what happens is we get an orphan animal that's not really an orphan. And the downfall with that is, remember, that mom can train them to be a better, whatever they are, better than we can. I always struggle. How do I teach a raccoon to fish or it's the bird, okay? So often, you remember, birds look up for food. Well, eventually they have to learn to look down, because when they fly, food's not going to fall from the sky. And so mom has to train them, and eventually what happens is mom puts the food on the ground. Well, if mom puts the food on the ground in a tree, the food's going to fall out. So the birds have to be out of the tree. So a lot of times we take a bird and we think it can't fly, a broken wing, or it's an orphan. Well, the mom was trying to train it to look down. And so it's little things like that I didn't know. And I had to have people explain that to me. I'm like, duh. It makes sense now, but
you don't think about it.
You don't think about that. No. So.
All right. How often are you working with wildlife professionals in different fields? So I know you have a lot of contact with other wildlife rehabilitators, but are there other wildlife professionals that you're in contact with that?
So there is a professor at SUNY Oswego that I stay in contact with. Quite in contact, depending on the semester, depending on what I'm doing. I probably reach out to her once a month. One thing being close to SUNY Oswego, which is a blessing to me. I just, not that long ago, we had a question about one of our water samples. So we brought it down to get tested, and one of the students did it in the lab, which is a blessing. Cool. Besides that, my best friend is a veterinarian in the military, and so he is kind of my guy I always call and check in. And then I have another contact that's also very much involved with working in the zoos that I reach out to. I know that in a bigger scale, it would be helpful to be involved in more people that are involved, because of the busyness of my life. being a youth pastor, coaching soccer, having 3 girls, and trying to raise a family, being a camp director and full-time staff here at the ministry, it's been a toll on my time, and so animals are one of the things that I view as more of a hobby than a job. This way I continue to love it. I find when you say something's a job, you don't love it as much. But because of that, I don't make the efforts to really probably reach out to as many other types of sources that I potentially could have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. As a wildlife professional, again, you probably touched on this already, but what would you like the public, like what's the main thing that you'd like the public to take away from what you do?
Call before you do anything. No. What the public, as far as just your general public?
Yeah, just, someone that, whether they bring you an animal or not, they just come here and they want to know something, and you have 1 minute to explain something to them. So what's your main takeaway that you'd want them to have?
Find what you love and do it as best you can. I think that ultimately that whether you think an animal might need help or not, always feel free to call. You might not get someone right away, but to realize that there is over 2,000 wildlife rehabilitators in New York State, depending on what you're trying to deal with. For example, if you want to get a raccoon, there's only about 140 that are licensed to work with raccoons. Out of that 140, probably 50 of them will return your call. And so realize that that rehabbers are not paid by the state. Some of them might have a contract with a grant or something like that, but most of us do it out of kindness of our heart. And a lot of them work other jobs and stuff like that. So forgive us if we don't call you back right away. But definitely always feel free to give us a call. I don't ever turn my phone off, and I have picked up my phone at 2 in the morning. I try not to, but yeah, if you need help, give us a call because we want to help. And the one thing that I would say, a lot of times people think that animal is too far to be helped. And sometimes animals might look good, and the reality is we need to euthanize them. For the safety of the public, they're not going to be... Yeah. We're here to release animals that are able to be released. We're not going to release animals. I have an opossum right now downstairs that is non-releasable. And I'm working with my vet to find out if he can be suitable to stay here as a non-releasable educational ambassador. Awesome, yeah. But some animals are not going to be able to be released. Our goal is not to keep any animals. And if an animal is going to be in captivity in a stressful environment, then we want to make sure we do the best thing for them, which sometimes is euthanize. But I've also had people tell me that they don't want to, they're afraid to bring me something because they think it's dead already. And believe it or not, I've had people bring me turtles that we had to euthanize, we had to kill them, but we were able to remove the eggs, and we hatched the eggs and released the eggs.
That's awesome.
And I've had people bring me opossums which have died, and the opossums, actually this was someone else. I ended up getting the opossums, but they brought the mom opossum to someone else, and the opossum did die, but there's baby opossums, and you don't see them always.
Yeah. And
so even when you think there's no hope in something, sometimes we can still pull good from it. And so that sometimes is it's hard, but ultimately the best advice I can tell anyone is, if you get anything or you're thinking of getting anything, call a rehabber. Fawns and rabbits, those are the 2 big ones that they do not need help if you see them by themselves. They do not have a scent on them, and so if mom would stay near them, then they would be a problem. And the predators would find them. And so the mom places them and she leaves. And sometimes we say we don't see mom because we're watching. Well, the mom sees us watching and doesn't want to draw attention to them. Right. And so she won't come back to them. And so if you call a rehabber, we can tell you how to know if the mom does come back. But basically, yeah, I hear rumors that the DEC is going to be updating the website. Right now, New York State has probably one of the most outdated websites.
It doesn't surprise me.
And so, but there's a lot of rumors about there's a new tech guy coming on, and so hopefully there's supposed to be a lot of good improvements coming up. Otherwise, check out any of the other states' websites. There's a lot of information about when animals need help and the good information.
Right. Okay.
I'm giving you a lot longer answers than you probably thought.
No, that's
right?
okay. Okay, so you probably use a lot of education and interpretation in your work to reach the public. I guess could you just touch on some examples of the ways that you do that, or you're planning to do it? Like you have a camp, so like
absolutely.
Are they involved in it?
Yes, and so we do educational shows. We go to schools. We do birthday parties. This past month was absolutely ridiculous. It was a blessing. It really was, because a lot of them we charge a little bit of money, which helps with a lot of what we do here. And it's great. It's a non-for-profit, so I don't get paid a single dime for this. And so every money that's donated and all stuff goes literally right back to building cages or animals or medication or vets and all that stuff. And my vet is phenomenal. But in the programs, we do a very good job talking about what needs to be helped, what does not. We talk about why animals are getting hunted down, invasive species. We do a huge thing on invasive species. Everyone's always afraid of, when you think of invasive species, what do you think of? What animal comes to your mind when you think of invasive species?
I can think of plants.
Okay.
Purple loosestrife.
Okay.
I can think of that, yeah.
And why is that a problem?
Because it comes in and outcompetes the native plants.
And pushes everything else aside. And one of the big things that we talk about is how are we contributing to that, and what do we do about that? And so a lot of people, I bring in a python, and they're like, they're all loose in the Everglades, and pythons are invasive species, and they are a bad thing. But because they're so big, that's why we're so scared of them.
Yeah.
And the reality is the tegu, the Argentine tegu, is actually doing more damage to the ecosystem down in the Everglades than the pythons are. Pythons eat one species maybe once a week. Okay, that's one species. Tegus, and I love tegus, I love them, but they're eating about 6 to 7 eggs a day of endangered birds. And so you have, which is more dangerous.
Right.
And so, but we always like to escalate the big things. I love to go to schools and talk to kids, and I have a blessing where every kid in Oswego knows who I am. Awesome. A lot of kids in Fulton do. I've gone to most of the schools. I go to all the nursing homes. I go to a lot of kids' birthdays. I do all the events, the fairs, all that stuff. And we're even going down in Syracuse now. Because this is kind of a hobby of mine. I'm hesitant to go too far.
Right.
I go to New Jersey and Pennsylvania every summer, and I do shows down there. How many I can get booked in that weekend, I kind of just go down and do a whole bunch. But I love talking to people, and that's where we use our ambassador animals. That's where we use the zoo animals, and the animals are all used to it. And so there's a lot of good that I can talk about, with a radio slider and compare it with the painted turtle around here. We bring snapping turtles, and we talk about how everyone thinks snapping turtles are these vicious animals. How many people have been bit by a snapping turtle? Now, let me rephrase that question. How many people have been bit by a snapping turtle that wasn't poking the snapping turtle or flipping it over, or, and we have this snapping turtle. It's this mean animal. We see it 1 month out of the year when it's trying to go from pond to pond to lay eggs or to mate. It's not this vicious animal. And yes, they do snap, but they're not even strict carnivore, which I always thought they were. They eat plants too. I had no clue about that. And so there's a lot of things that even animals that are from around here that we're not even familiar with. And so I try to do a lot. I talk about snakes. Everyone thinks that every snake's poisonous. There's over 2,000 species of snakes. 1/3 of them are actually venomous, okay? 1/3 of that 1/3 is venomous enough to hurt a human. And let's be honest, they all live in Australia and Africa. Like, they're not even around here.
Yeah.
All right? I mean, we have a few around here, but I mean, majority of what we are fearful of is because of Hollywood. What I mean, name me a movie that doesn't portray snakes in a bad way. Exactly. Snakes on a plane, Anaconda, you know, but even The Jungle Book. I mean, it's a Disney movie. Yeah. Everything portrays that snakes as evil, and you know, there's a logic to a lot of this, but my biggest thing is talking with people and realizing that we don't have to love everything. We just gotta respect it enough not to kill it.
Yeah.
I do not love spiders, but I'm appreciative. Without them, we would have a huge amount of mosquitoes. I don't like mosquitoes. And so it's perspective in the sense of, I'm not saying that you have to own one or tolerate one. You have to tolerate it. That's the
yeah.
thing.
Right. Okay, so last question. When you're looking for employees, which I guess I could change it to interns, because you probably don't hire a whole bunch of people for the zoo and the rehabilitation stuff, but what qualities or qualifications are you looking for?
You looking for a job?
Well, I am, but...
Probably cannot pay off your loans, but I make really good iced tea, all right? You know, kind of firsthand experience. To do well working here, I look for a couple of big things. One, and probably the most important, is being a hard worker, because I count on you. Second, and this kind of goes along with that, being able to be an independent worker. And this is one that might not apply as much in zoo settings, to say. There is a safety factor where I enjoy having more than one of you guys here at a time. Anytime we work with heat, venomous, or anything that is what I would view as a level 4 or higher, there has to be someone else on the property, which here is actually not a hard problem because there's always people here, but someone who's somewhat trained in working with that. I